California real estate was supposed to be the one market that never breaks. It's finally doing exactly that. Forget the Bay Area bidding wars and million-dollar SoCal shacks you keep seeing in headlines. That's not where the real carnage is happening. Behind the palm trees and overpriced matcha, a brutal correction is tearing through entire cities. With home values collapsing 50 to 80% in places nobody expected. And no, that isn't a typo or a worst-case scenario. That's the current reality on the ground right now. Here's the first pattern interrupt. The state everyone assumes only ever gets more expensive is now home to some of the fastest, deepest housing crashes in the entire country, and almost none of it is making the front page. If you've ever dreamed of buying in California, this list could save you six figures. And if you already live in one of these 10, buckle up, it gets brutal fast, reshuffled from what you'd expect, and counted down from the strangest collapse to the most catastrophic one on record. This isn't scare-mongering for clicks, it's the actual median price data, county by county. And it tells a story that mainstream real estate coverage has been remarkably slow to catch up with. Number 10. San Francisco. The city that once minted millionaires out of anyone who could fog a mirror and sign a mortgage has watched its shine tarnish fast. Median home prices have crashed 40% since 2021, from over $1.6 million down to just north of $950,000. Some downtown condos are down over 55%, with luxury high-rises near Soma selling for less than their 2015 price tags. Here's the twist. This isn't a discount. It's a full financial distress signal. Tens of thousands of tech layoffs between 2023 and 2024 emptied out condos that once commanded six figures, leaving owners paying $1,200 a month HOA fees just to live near a boarded-up Walgreens. Downtown commercial vacancy hit a staggering 34% in early 2025. Property taxes haven't adjusted downward either, so plenty of owners are paying 2022-level tax bills on what's now a 2025 fire sale. Sidewalk cleanliness fines are still being enforced in neighborhoods that increasingly resemble abandoned movie sets, a level of denial that says everything about how far this market has fallen. Retail vacancies keep multiplying along once premium corridors, and Whole Foods locations have shuttered over safety concerns in a city that used to charge a premium simply for proximity to one. Rideshare drivers now routinely carry pepper spray for daytime pickups downtown. A small but telling detail for a city whose entire real estate premium was built on the promise of safety and convenience that increasingly no longer holds. Property taxes stayed pinned to 2022 valuations even as prices fell, which means plenty of owners are effectively paying peak-era taxes on a fire sale asset with no relief from the county in sight. Number 9. Palmdale. Half-built subdivisions, for sale banners snapping in the wind, and tumbleweeds crossing streets meant for a master-planned community that never fully arrived. Median prices have cratered 37% since 2021, from roughly $470,000 down to $295,000, with newer developments listing at $220,000 for homes that sold for $480,000 just 3 years ago. Here's the pattern interrupt. Builders kept flooding this desert town with inventory long after the remote work migration that justified it had already reversed. Water rationing returned this summer. Property crime is climbing, and entire blocks now sit half-empty with lockboxes on nearly every other door. City officials are begging Sacramento for infrastructure funding while roads crumble and transit projects stall out entirely. Palmdale Space Museum still celebrates its aviation history. But the only thing actually taking off these days is the number of price cuts stacking up on every single listing in town. Roughly 2 out of every 5 homes on some blocks now carry lockboxes on the front door, turning what was marketed as a master-planned community into something closer to a slow-motion liquidation sale. City Council approved growth far faster than infrastructure could ever support it. And now, officials are lobbying Sacramento for emergency funding, while basic road repairs and transit projects sit stalled indefinitely. Water rationing rules returned again this summer, And one resident described HOA fines landing on brown, drought-stricken lawns in a neighborhood that increasingly feels less like a community and more like a slow liquidation in progress. Number 8. Stockton. For sale signs are multiplying like rabbits here, and it's not subtle. Median home prices have plunged more than 35% since 2021, from $450,000 down to roughly $295,000, with entire neighborhoods losing over half their value outright, and no clear signal yet that the bleeding has actually stopped. Foreclosures have surged 62% year over year, according to CoreLogic, and delinquency rates are spiking hardest in lower-income zip codes where families have the least financial cushion left to absorb another shock like this one. Here's the twist. Stockton sits along major levees, and after FEMA's 2024 flood remapping, a wave of homeowners discovered their properties suddenly carry high-risk status and $4,000 annual flood premiums they never budgeted for. Property crime remains stubbornly high, still ranking near the top statewide. Stockton was the largest U.S. city to file for bankruptcy back in 2012, and with foreclosures surging again, longtime residents describe an unsettling sense of déjà vu, the same spiral, just with steeper taxes and even less patience left this time around. Even the algorithms tracking these listings seem to be pleading for buyers at this point, stacking motivated seller and bring all offers tags onto homes that would have triggered bidding wars just 3 years ago. Property crime remains stubbornly common, too, with residents describing repeated break-ins even as their monthly mortgage payments shrink. A genuinely strange trade off nobody signed up for when they first bought in. FEMA's 2024 flood remapping pushed even more homes into high-risk territory practically overnight, meaning owners who never budgeted for flood coverage are now staring down thousands in unexpected annual premiums just to keep their mortgage current. Number 7. Oxnard. The beach. The breeze. The $1. 2 million shingled boxes with a peekaboo ocean view that pitch is now crumbling under its own weight. Median prices have tanked 35% since 2022, from $830,000 down to roughly $540,000, with waterfront condos that sold for $1.3 million now sitting stale near $700,000, despite sellers throwing in furniture and appliances just to move the deal along. Here's the pattern interrupt. Coastal property here used to be a bragging right, and it's become a billing nightmare instead. Major insurers pulled out entirely, pushing homeowners onto the California Fair Plan at premiums exceeding $6,000 a year for wind and fire coverage alone. Ventura County reassessed valuations after the 2021 spike. So property tax bills haven't budged even as home values sank 30%. Drought fines keep landing on residents while the city's own infrastructure leaks freely. Oxnard once sold itself as coastal California without the Malibu markup. Now it's Malibu's forgotten cousin, complete with a cracked foundation and a shrinking bank account to match. Tourism has slowed noticeably as well, and locals who once commuted from cheaper inland areas simply to enjoy the beach on weekends have stopped making the drive altogether now that the upkeep costs barely justify the trip. Drought-related fines keep landing on homeowners even as the city's own aging pipes leak freely, a contradiction residents point out constantly without ever seeing it actually addressed. Even the tent encampments, now visible along the dunes, tell their own version of the story, a supposed beachfront paradise, increasingly unable to house the people who actually keep the local economy running day to day. Number 6. Vallejo. A waterfront town with a ferry ride straight to San Francisco, priced like it was some kind of loophole until 2025 slapped a foreclosure sticker on that entire fantasy. Median prices have collapsed a jaw, dropping 40% since 2021, from $550,000 down to roughly $330,000, with some pockets flirting with 60% off peak numbers that would have sounded absurd to anyone browsing listings here back in 2021. Here's the twist. Remote workers realized that same money bought actual land in Idaho, and they left en masse, taking the tax base and the buyer pool with them almost overnight. Vallejo's credit rating sank to one notch above junk back in 2023. Infrastructure is crumbling, and major insurers have simply pulled out of the city altogether. Locals are walking away outright. One resident described handing keys straight back to the bank because renting in Reno felt cheaper than fighting the mortgage here. Vallejo has now filed for bankruptcy twice, and this crash is testing whether the city can survive a third brush with financial collapse. Police response times have stretched so long that residents joke about packing a snack before calling for help, and that kind of gallows humor tends to spread fast once locals stop expecting the city to actually fix anything at all. Major insurers have pulled out entirely, leaving homeowners scrambling for coverage the moment a roof leak or a foundation crack shows up unannounced. One resident described a neighbor simply handing the keys back to the bank outright, reasoning that renting in Reno and gambling on a fresh start felt genuinely cheaper than continuing to fight a mortgage on a home losing value every single month. Number 5. San Bernardino. The downtown here looks frozen since 1994, and the air genuinely smells like asphalt and quiet desperation. Median prices have dropped 37% since 2021, from $410,000 down to roughly $260,000, with some previously revitalized zip codes down more than 50%, numbers that would have seemed unthinkable for this market just a few short years ago. Here's the pattern interrupt. This city already carried California's highest poverty rate before this crash even started. And now, inflation and layoffs are compounding an already fragile foundation that had almost no cushion left to absorb another shock. Burglaries jumped 18% in the past year. Appraisals are routinely landing $80,000 below accepted offers. And City Hall can barely keep enough staff to process basic permits on time. Wildfire risk edges dangerously close to residential blocks. And insurers have quietly labeled entire neighborhoods high risk after last year's brush fire scare. San Bernardino declared bankruptcy back in 2012, and with equity collapsing again, longtime residents are openly whispering that history may be circling back for round 2. Eviction notices and boarded windows are increasingly common on streets that developers were hyping as fully revitalized just a couple of years ago, a whiplash few homeowners saw coming this fast or this hard. Public services remain stretched dangerously thin, and even routine permit processing now takes weeks longer than it did before the layoffs and budget cuts hit City Hall directly. Insurance coverage has become genuinely spotty too, as wildfire zones creep closer to residential blocks and insurers quietly reassess entire postal codes as high risk after last year's brush fire came within a mile of occupied homes. Number 4. Bakersfield. Oil rigs, endless strip malls, and country music dreams now running headfirst into burning cash instead. Median prices have dropped 33% since 2022, from roughly $400,000 down to $265,000, with outlying neighborhoods seeing cuts beyond 45%. And there's still no clear sign the decline has actually bottomed out yet. Here's the twist. The oil industry that props up much of this local economy took a brutal hit in late 2024 as regulations tightened and prices dipped, triggering layoffs in waves that rippled straight through every other sector of the local job market. Bakersfield was once the affordable fallback for priced-out Californians, and now even those transplants are leaving, flipping migration trends into a net outflow. Insurance premiums have doubled for some homeowners thanks to earthquake risk and a rash of fires from aging equipment. Bakersfield also ranks among the worst U.S. cities for air quality, meaning even buyers who survive the falling home values still have to contend with genuinely unlivable summer smog outside their front door. Former investors are now offering free months of rent and waived deposits just to fill units, a landlord fire sale that's spreading across the rental market almost as fast as the layoffs that triggered it in the first place. Insurance premiums have doubled for some homeowners here too, driven partly by earthquake exposure and partly by a rash of house fires linked to aging swamp coolers nobody's bothered replacing yet. Migration patterns have fully reversed as well, with net outflow now the norm, as even the priced-out Californians who once saw Bakersfield as a fallback have started looking elsewhere entirely. Number 3. Fresno. This used to be the city coastal Californians pointed to as at least it's still affordable. Not anymore. Median prices have fallen from nearly $410,000 in 2022 to just under $300,000 today, with some neighborhoods down closer to 50%, a swing that caught even longtime local realtors off guard. Here's the pattern interrupt. This collapse wasn't caused by crime or wildfire. It was caused by everyone turning their spare property into a short-term rental at once, flooding the market until vacancy signs became as common as potholes across town. Fresno hit 117 degrees 3 separate times in 2024 alone, spiking insurance premiums up to 70% in some zip codes purely from heat-related risk. Tech layoffs trickled down from the Bay, agricultural jobs have thinned out, and the solar farm everyone was hyped about remains an empty dirt lot with a faded banner. Fresno was supposed to be a hidden gem for years to come. Instead, it's simply hidden, buried under an oversupply nobody saw coming this fast. Cracked stucco and dried-out lawns line entire blocks now, and some landlords who bought multiple duplexes during the pandemic rush say they can no longer rent, sell, or even refinance their way out of the properties they once considered a sure thing. Agricultural employment has thinned out too, and the solar farm project everyone was excited about back in 2022 remains nothing more than an empty dirt lot with a faded coming soon banner still flapping over it. Air conditioning bills now routinely rival car payments during peak summer months, adding one more ongoing cost that buyers rarely factor in until the first real heat wave actually hits their new mortgage budget. Number 2, Riverside. SoCal sunshine and affordable suburbia was the pitch. Instead, this is the Inland Empire fighting and losing its crown as the region's most overpriced mediocrity. Median prices have dropped from roughly $570,000 in 2021 to around $410,000 today, with some neighborhoods marked down 50% from their pandemic peak, a decline that's left plenty of recent buyers sitting well underwater on their original purchase. Here's the twist. Logistics and warehouse jobs, Long Riverside's economic backbone, are drying up fast as automation and e-commerce pullbacks hit distribution centers across the entire region. Inventory has ballooned, days on market have tripled in certain zip codes, and home fees keep climbing even as home values sink. Water bills have spiked through repeated drought restrictions, leaving residents paying premium rates for lawns that are already dead. House flippers are abandoning mid-renovation projects outright, leaving plywood-covered windows scattered across neighborhoods that were supposed to be this decade's comeback story. Property taxes and dues haven't budged despite falling values, leaving owners stuck covering fixed costs on a rapidly depreciating asset with no clear floor in sight just yet. Water bills have spiked through repeated drought restrictions, and one homeowner described watering her lawn twice all summer and still receiving a bill nearly $300 higher than the year before, on grass that was already dead anyway. Logistics companies that once anchored much of the local job market have quietly automated entire warehouse shifts, cutting the exact blue-collar paychecks that used to keep this housing market moving in the first place. Number 1, Lancaster. Close enough to LA for opportunity, far enough to dodge the price tag that was the pitch, and it's unraveling in painfully slow motion. Median prices have crashed 40 to 50% since 2021, from roughly $430,000 down to $260,000, with some listings dropping below $200,000 entirely, a crater that's still deepening with no clear bottom yet in sight. Here's the final pattern interrupt. Fire insurance here is now nearly impossible to obtain at any price. After CAL FIRE labeled large sections of the area severe fire hazard zones, yet builders kept pumping out cookie-cutter subdivisions anyway, betting on a remote work wave that had already crested and broken elsewhere. Delisted properties have spiked 60% in the past year as sellers quietly hold on to depreciating homes rather than admit they overpaid at the peak. Rental listings sit empty at $1,900 a month, down sharply from $2,400 just 2 years ago. Lancaster once hosted California's first musical road. Today, the only recurring sound in town is the price cut notification, chiming on yet another listing. 3-bedroom rentals now sit empty at $1,900 a month, well below the $2,400 they commanded just 2 years ago, leaving even patient landlords wondering how much further this particular correction still has left to fall. Delisted properties have jumped 60% over the past year alone, as sellers quietly hold on to depreciating homes rather than publicly admit they overpaid at the absolute peak of the boom. Fire insurance carriers have effectively ghosted large parts of this market entirely, and buyers who do manage to secure a policy are frequently paying more annually for coverage than they once paid for their monthly mortgage installment. That's the full Countdown 10 California cities where the prices only go up myth has quietly, catastrophically broken. From tech empty towers in San Francisco to fire uninsurable subdivisions in Lancaster, the pattern repeats everywhere. Cheap money and pandemic migration built valuations the local economy could never actually support long term. Here's the very last pattern interrupt worth sitting with. Not one of these 10 crashes was caused by the same single-factor insurance collapse, job losses, oversupply, and outright bankruptcy each played the lead role somewhere on this list, which means no single fix, policy change, or interest rate cut is going to reverse all of it at once. These aren't corrections, they're collapses, and the data across every single one of these 10 cities backs that up consistently, from the coast all the way inland. If your city made this list, or if you're watching one crash from the outside, the real question is simple. Does this look like the bottom, or does it look like the middle?